Henry Lawson stood in front of the old woodshop, his boots crunching against the gravel drive, his calloused hands brushing the weathered door. It had been locked up tight for 3 years since he'd hung up his tools at 62, figuring 40 years of sawdust and sweat was enough. The place looked smaller now, the paint peeling like old skin, the windows cloudy with grime. But it still smelled the same: pine, varnish, the faint tang of oil. He pulled his faded flannel jacket tighter against the March chill, 65 years weighing on his shoulders, and took a deep breath. This was it. Time to go back. He'd slipped out that morning before the sun was up, leaving Lisa still asleep in their little house a mile down the road. She hadn't stirred head in a while, not with the way her breathing had gotten shallow lately. Henry didn't tell her where he was going. Didn't tell anyone. But when he got home that afternoon, toolbox in hand and sawdust clinging to his jeans, his sons were there, Tom and Ryan, sprawled on the couch with beers and a football game blaring. Tom, 35, with his gym-toned arms and salesman's grin, looked up first. "What's this?" he said, laughing sharp and loud. "The old man's playing carpenter again? You forget where the recliner is, Dad." Ryan, 32, leaner and quieter, shook his head with a smirk. "Seriously, Pop, you're 65. What's next building us a tree house? You're supposed to be golfing or something, not hauling lumber." Henry set the toolbox down by the door, his face a mask of calm. He didn't answer, just shrugged and headed to the kitchen to wash the grit off his hands. Their laughter followed him, bouncing off the walls of the house he'd built with his own 2 hands back in 1982. He let it roll off, always had. His boys didn't get it, never had. To them, he was just a stubborn old man who fixed everything himself, who'd rather patch a roof than pay a guy, who'd saved every dime like it was the last one he'd ever see. They didn't see the why behind it. Henry didn't expect them to. He'd raised them right, or tried to. Tom was a car salesman now, slick and successful, with a condo downtown. Ryan worked IT, steady and sharp, renting a place near the tech park. They'd come out fine, better than fine, but they'd drifted from the life Henry and Lisa knew. To them, retirement meant trips to Florida, new gadgets, kicking back. To Henry, it meant quiet days with Lisa, a garden out back, maybe a fishing trip if the weather held. That's how it had been, till lately. Till Evelyn it. Lisa was 62, 3 years his junior, with a laugh that used to fill the house and eyes that still sparkled when she teased him about his stubborn streak. But the sparkle had dimmed over the last year. She'd started slowing down, tired all the time, short of breath, brushing it off as just getting old. Henry knew better. He'd seen the way she winced when she thought he wasn't looking, the way her hands shook pouring coffee. 2 weeks back, he dragged her to the doctor over her protests, and the news hit like a sledgehammer. Congestive heart failure. Advanced. She needed surgery, a big one. Sooner she wouldn't make it to summer. The cost was a gut punch. $50,000, maybe more, even with insurance. They'd saved over the years. Henry wasn't one to spend foolishly, but it wasn't enough. Not close. Lisa didn't know the numbers. He'd kept that from her, said it'd all work out. She didn't need to worry. But he did. That night, lying awake while she slept fitful beside him, he'd made up his mind. The woodshop, his hands, his time, it was all he had left to give. He'd gone to see Carl, the shop's owner, the next day. Carl was 70 himself, still running the place with a limp and a grin. "You sure about this, Henry?" he'd asked, eyeing him over a cluttered desk. "You've been out of it a while." Henry nodded. "I'm sure." Carl didn't push, just handed him a key and pointed to a workbench in the corner. Small jobs to start, cash under the table. It'd do. That first day back, Henry felt every one of his 65 years. His knees ached climbing the shop steps, his back groaned lifting a plank of oak. But his hands remembered steady, sure, tracing the grain like an old friend. He didn't tell Lisa he'd started again, just said he was running errands when she asked. The boys finding out was an accident. Tom had swung by to drop off a six-pack, Ryan tagging along to watch the game. Now, they were laughing, thinking he'd lost his mind, and Henry let them. Better they laugh than no. He stood at the sink, scrubbing sawdust from his knuckles, their voices drifting in from the living room. "He's going to keel over hauling wood," Tom said, chuckling. "What's he even need the money for? Coupon's not cutting it. Ryan snorted. Maybe he's building a time machine back to 1970. Henry dried his hands on a dish towel, slow and deliberate, his jaw tight. They didn't see the hospital bills piling up in his mind, the clock ticking down on Lisa's heart. He wouldn't tell them not yet. This was his burden, his fight. But as he turned off the faucet, a question gnawed at him. How long could he keep this up? His body wasn't what it used to be. 40 years of bending over benches had left their mark. The shop was a start, but $50,000 was a mountain, and he was climbing alone. He glanced at Lisa's chair in the corner, empty now while she napped upstairs, and felt a pang sharp enough to steal his breath. He'd promised her forever, back when they were 20 and broke, standing in a courthouse with $10 and a ring from a pawn shop. He wasn't breaking that promise now. Henry slipped the towel over the rack and headed upstairs, leaving the boys to their game. He'd go back tomorrow, so back. Tired hands, whatever it took. They could laugh all they wanted. He'd show them what an old man could do. But what was he hiding? And how long could he keep it buried? The next morning, Henry Lawson was up before the rooster down the road even thought about crowing. The house was still dark, Lisa's soft snores drifting from their bedroom as he pulled on his old work boots. The leather cracked but familiar. He didn't wake her, didn't want her asking questions he wasn't ready to answer. By 5:30, he was out the door, the chill of early spring biting at his knuckles as he walked the mile to Carl's wood shop. The toolbox swung heavy in his hand, a reminder of what he was stepping back into. 65 years old, and here he was, starting over. The shop was quiet when he got there, just the hum of a fluorescent light flickering overhead. Carl wasn't in yet, but a couple of younger guys, 20-somethings with tattoos and earbuds were unloading a delivery of pine planks. They glanced up as Henry shuffled in, his flannel jacket dusted with frost. One of them, a lanky kid with a buzz cut, smirked. "You the new guy?" he asked, hefting a board onto a stack. "What's an old-timer like you doing here?" Henry set his toolbox down by his workbench, ignoring the jab. "Same as you," he said, voice gruff but steady. "Working." The kid snorted, exchanging a look with his buddy, but they didn't push it. Henry didn't care what they thought. He wasn't here to make friends, she was here for Lisa. He started small, like Carl had said, sanding down a batch of chair legs, simple stuff to get his hands back in the groove. The sander buzzed under his grip, the wood smoothing out slow and sure, but his shoulders ached within an hour. 40 years of this work had carved lines into his body, arthritis in his fingers, a twinge in his lower back that never quite went away. He'd forgotten how heavy it could feel, how the dust settled into your lungs like an uninvited guest. By noon, his shirt was damp with sweat, and his knees creaked every time he stood to stretch. The young guys watched him, not outright staring, but stealing glances when they thought he wouldn't notice. "He's slow," he heard the buzz-cut kid mutter once, stacking finished pieces. "Hope he doesn't croak on us." His buddy laughed low and sharp. Henry kept his head down, running his sandpaper over the grain, pretending he didn't hear. They didn't know why he was here, and he wasn't about to tell them. Every ache, every jab, they were just noise. The real fight was the clock ticking down on Lisa's surgery, the $50,000 he needed to scrape together. He worked through the day, pushing past the stiffness, the way his hands cramped around the tools. Carl showed up around 2, limping in with a thermos of coffee and a nod. "How's it going, Henry?" he asked, leaning against the saw table. "Fine," Henry lied, brushing sawdust off his jeans. "Just getting the rust off." Carl studied him, his gray eyes sharp despite the years. "Don't overdo it, all right? You're not 30 anymore." Henry nodded, but he didn't mean it. He couldn't afford to take it easy, not with Lisa fading a little more every day. By the time he got home that evening, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky orange over their little house. His back screamed as he climbed the porch steps, and his left hand throbbed where he'd nicked it on a splinter. Lisa was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, her movements slow and careful. "Long day running errands?" she asked, glancing over with a faint smile. "Yeah," Henry said, hanging his jacket by the door. "Took longer than I thought." She didn't press, just nodded and turned back to the stove. He hated lying to her always, but the truth would only make her worry, and she had enough on her plate. "The boys found out that weekend. Tom swung by Saturday morning, his shiny red Mustang growling up the drive, Ryan in tow with a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. They'd come to fix the Wi-Fi leases, shows kept buffering, and caught Henry heading out, toolbox in hand again. Tom laughed first, loud and bright. "What's this, Dad? You starting a carpentry comeback tour? You're 65, act like it." Ryan grinned, leaning against the porch rail. "Yeah, Pop. You're supposed to be napping or fishing, not playing lumberjack. What's the deal?" Henry shrugged, keeping his face blank. "Just keeping busy," he said, stepping past them. Their laughter trailed him down the drive, sharp as nails. "He's gonna drop dead hauling wood," Tom called after him, half joking. "Bet he's too cheap to buy a new TV or something," Ryan added, chuckling. Henry didn't turn back. He walked on, the toolbox banging against his leg, their words stinging more than he'd let on. They didn't get it, never would, maybe. To them, he was the stingy old man who'd rather fix a chair than buy one, who'd saved every penny like it was gold. They didn't see the hospital bills he'd tucked away in a drawer, the way Lisa's cough had gotten deeper, the doctor's voice saying soon, like a death knell. He wasn't doing this for kicks, she was doing it for her. Every dollar he earned went into an old wooden box he'd carved himself back in '95, stashed under the bed where no one looked. But the days wore him down. By the end of that first week, the pain was constant, his back a knot of fire, his hands stiff and raw. He kept going, sanding, cutting, stacking, ignoring the way his breath came short or his legs wobbled after lunch. The young guys at the shop stopped teasing as much, they just watched now, curious or maybe a little impressed. Carl slipped him cash every Friday, small bills that added up slow but steady. It wasn't enough not yet, but it was something. Then it happened. Late one afternoon, the shop quiet except for the whine of a saw, Henry was hauling a slab of maple to the workbench. His grip slipped just a second and his back seized up, a bolt of pain shooting down his spine. He stumbled, the wood crashing to the floor, and went down hard on one knee. The buzz-cut kid dropped his sander and ran over. "Hey, you okay, man?" he asked, voice sharp with worry. Henry waved him off, gritting his teeth, but he couldn't stand not yet. The room spun, his chest tight, the weight of it all pressing down. Carl was there in a flash, limping fast. "That's it," he said firm. "You're done for today. Go home, Henry." Henry shook his head, stubborn as ever, but Carl wouldn't budge. "I said go. You're no good to anyone passed out." The kid helped him up, and Henry shuffled out, the pain a steady drumbeat in his bones. He made it home, collapsed into a chair, and sat there, staring at that wooden box under the bed. He'd pushed too far, maybe too fast. But quitting wasn't in him, not when Lisa needed him. Hey, if you're still here and think family's worth fighting for, hit that like button and drop a comment. What would you do for the ones you love? I'd love to hear it. Henry Lawson didn't make it back to the wood shop the next day. The fall had done a number on him, his back locked up tight, his knees swollen where he'd hit the floor. He woke up that morning stiff as a board, every move a stab of pain, but he didn't let on Elisa. She was in the kitchen, humming soft over a cup of tea, her face pale but peaceful. "You all right, hon?" she asked, catching him wincing as he eased into a chair. "Just sore," he said, forcing a half smile. "Must have slept funny." She nodded, accepting it like she always did, and he hated himself a little more for the lie. He'd gotten good at hiding things, too good, maybe, but the truth was a weight he wouldn't dump on her, not when she was already carrying so much. By noon, though, the jig was up. Carl called, his gravelly voice crackling through the old landline. "You're not coming in, are you?" he said, not waiting for an answer. "Good. Stay put. I'm sending someone to check on you." Henry started to protest, but Carl cut him off. "Don't argue, Lawson. You're no spring chicken. Rest." The line went dead, and Henry sat there, staring at the receiver, a mix of relief and frustration churning in his gut. He needed the work, needed the money, but his body wasn't playing along. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Henry shuffled over, expecting one of Carl's guys with a get-well grunt. Instead, it was Tom and Ryan, standing on the porch with takeout bags and worried frowns. "Hey, Dad," Tom said, stepping inside without asking. "Carl called us. Said you took a spill at the shop. What's going on?" Ryan followed, quieter, his eyes scanning Henry's stiff frame. "You look rough, Pop." Why didn't you tell us? Henry waved them off, hobbling back to his chair. It's nothing, he muttered. Tripped over some wood. I'm fine. He didn't meet their gazes, just sank down and rubbed his knee, hoping they'd drop it. But Tom wasn't having it. He set the bags on the table, crossing his arms like he was sizing up a car lot customer. Bull, Tom said sharp. Carl said you collapsed. You're 65, dad not some kid. What are you even doing out there? You don't need the cash you've got savings, right? Ryan nodded, softer but firm. Yeah, Pop. You're supposed to be retired. This isn't funny anymore. Henry clenched his jaw, the ache in his back flaring as he shifted. He could have told them, spilled it all right there, the hospital bills, Lisa's heart, the ticking clock. But he didn't. He'd carried this alone so far, and old habits died hard. I like the work, he said instead, voice flat. Keeps me sharp. That's all. The boys exchanged a look, half exasperation, half concern, but before they could push, Lisa shuffled in from the kitchen, her slippers whispering against the floor. Oh, good, she said, smiling faint at the sight of them. You boys staying for lunch? That was a conversation over. Tom and Ryan let it go, unpacking the food while Lisa chattered about the neighbor's new dog. Henry sat silent, grateful for the distraction, but the weight of their questions lingered. They didn't stay long. Tom had a client meeting, Ryan a deadline, but as they left, Tom clapped Henry on the shoulder a little too hard. Take it easy, Dad, he said. No more shop stunts, all right? Ryan just nodded, his eyes lingering like he saw more than he let on. Henry watched them drive off, the Mustang's rumble fading down the road, and felt a pang he couldn't name. They Coretta knew that, but they didn't understand. Not yet. That night, he was back in bed, Lisa asleep beside him, when the phone rang again. He grabbed it quick, keeping his voice low. It was Carl, sounding gruffer than usual. You're in the paper, he said, no preamble. Some kid at the shop snapped a pic when you went down. Retired carpenter collapses on job. Folks are talking. Henry's stomach dropped. What? Yeah, Carl went on. Got people asking why you're back. I didn't say nothing, but look, Henry, you sure you want to keep this up? You're killing yourself out there. Henry hung up after a mumbled thanks, his mind racing. The paper. If Tom and Ryan saw either worse, least Saha'd have to explain. He couldn't let that happen, not till he had enough in that wooden box. He pushed through, paper or no paper. But his body had other plans. The next day, the pain was worse, sharp enough to keep him home again, stuck in that chair with a heating pad and a sinking feeling. By midweek, the boys were back, this time at the hospital. Henry'd taken a turn, his knee giving out on the stairs, and Lisa had called them in a panic. He sat in a sterile room, and Ford dripping into his arm, when Tom and Ryan burst in, faces tight with worry. What the hell, Dad? Tom snapped, pacing. You're in here because of that damn shop? Tell us what's going on now. Henry stared at the floor, the beep of the monitor loud in his ears. He opened his mouth to brush them off again, but someone else spoke first. Carl's voice, rough and unexpected, came from the doorway. He's doing it for your mom, he said, leaning on his cane. Been busting his hump to pay for her surgery. Didn't want you boys knowing. The room went still. Tom stopped pacing, his jaw slack. Ryan's eyes widened, his laptop bag slipping off his shoulder to the floor. Henry looked up, caught Carl's grim nod, and felt the air rush out of him. The secret was out, torn open like a split seam. He couldn't hide it anymore. Tom turned slow, his voice a whisper. Mom's surgery? What surgery? She's sick, Henry said, the words heavy, final. Heart's failing. Needs an operation we can't afford. I've been working to cover it. Ryan sank into a chair, hands over his face. Jesus, Dad, why didn't you tell us? Henry shrugged, a tired, broken gesture. Didn't want you worrying. Thought I could handle it. The silence stretched, thick and raw. Tom and Ryan looked at each other, then back at him, and something shifted in their eyes, shock turning to guilt, anger to regret. They'd laughed at him, mocked him, while he'd been breaking himself for Lisa. Tom ran a hand through his hair, muttering, "We're idiots." Ryan just stared, his throat working like he couldn't find words. Henry looked away, the fur cold against his skin. He'd kept it buried too long, and now was out, laid bare in a hospital room with fluorescent lights and antiseptic air. The boys finally knew the weight of that hit harder than the fall at the shop. They'd been blind, but so had he, thinking he could carry this alone. Now what? What would they do with the truth? The hospital room felt smaller after Carl dropped the bomb, the walls pressing in on Henry Lawson as he sat propped up in the bed, and 4 line snaking into his arm. Tom and Ryan stood there, frozen in the wake of the truth Lisa's surgery, Henry's secret grind at the woodshop, the whole messy weight of it laid bare. The beep of the monitor filled the silence, steady and accusing, while Carl lingered in the doorway, his cane tapping once before he shuffled out, leaving them to deal with the fallout. Tom broke first, his voice low and rough. "You should have told us, Dad. Why the hell didn't you tell us?" He paced again, hands balled into fists like he wanted to hit something but didn't know what. Ryan stayed put, slumped in the chair, staring at Henry with eyes that looked too old for 32. Henry shifted, wincing as his back protested. "Didn't see the point," he said, his tone flat, tired. "You've got your lives. Didn't want to drag you into this." "Drag us?" Tom snapped, stopping mid-step. "She's our mom, Dad. You don't get to decide that for us." His voice cracked, anger mixing with something softer hurt, maybe, or shame. Ryan nodded slow, his hands dropping from his face. "He's right," he said quietly. "We could have helped." Henry looked away, out the window where the afternoon light was fading into gray. He'd heard that tone before Ella's voice, years back, when he tried to fix the roof alone and nearly broke his neck. "You don't have to do it all," she'd said. He hadn't listened then either. Now here he was, 65 and falling apart, with 2 sons staring him down and a wife who didn't even know he was in here. He'd pushed too far, and it had landed him flat literally. The doctor came by later, a young guy with a clipboard and a no-nonsense frown. "You've got a sprained knee and some bruising," he said, glancing at Henry's chart. "Nothing broken, but you're dehydrated and overtaxed. You need rest-restore, you're headed for worse." He didn't ask why a retired carpenter was hauling wood. He just scribbled a prescription and left. Tom and Ryan stayed, hovering like they were afraid he'd bolt the second they turn away. They got him home that evening, Lisa fussing over him the moment he limped through the door. "What happened?" she asked, her voice thin with worry as she helped him to the couch. "Fell at the shop," Henry mumbled, avoiding her eyes. She didn't push, just brought him a glass of water and a blanket, her hands trembling more than usual. Tom and Ryan lingered in the kitchen, whispering fierce and low, but Henry caught snatches. "Mom's sick. He's killing himself. We've got to do something." By morning, he was up again, stubborn as ever. His knee throbbed, his back a dull roar, but he grabbed his boots anyway, fumbling with the laces till Ryan caught him. "No way, Pop," Ryan said, stepping in front of the door. "You're not going back there." Henry straightened, slow and painful. "I've got to," he said, voice hard. "She needs the money. I'm not done." Tom appeared from the hall, his jaw set. "You are done," he said, sharper than Ryan but just as firm. "You're not killing yourself for this. We're taking over." Henry opened his mouth to argue, but Tom held up a hand. "No, Dave, you've done enough. Let's handle it." The room went quiet, the standoff heavy. Henry glared at them, his boys now men, standing taller than he'd ever seen them. He wanted to fight, every instinct screamed to keep going, to carry this himself, but his body wouldn't budge. He sank back onto the couch, defeated, the boots slipping from his hands. "All right," he muttered, barely audible, "but it's got to get done." They didn't waste time. Tom was on the phone that afternoon, his voice clipped and serious. "Yeah, the Mustang 20 grand, firm. Can you pick it up tomorrow?" Henry overheard from the living room, his head snapping up. Tom's pride, Enjoy the red beast he'd spent years tweaking, was on the block. When Tom hung up, he caught Henry's look and shrugged. "It's just a car, Dad. Mom's worth more." Ryan was next, hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table, typing fast. "Boss says I can pull doubles for the next month," he said, not looking up. "IT's crazy right now, extra cash will pile up quick." Henry watched them, a knot tightening in his chest. They were moving fast, decisive, like they'd flipped a switch he didn't know they had. He'd raised them to stand on their own, but this was new. The twist came that night. Lisa was upstairs, resting, when Tom pulled Henry aside, his face pale. We call the doctor, he said, voice low. Mom's worse than you said. Surgery's not a maybe, it's now or never. They're scheduling it for next week. Ryan joined them, nodding grim. We've got about half the money between us, he said. Your box under the bed is close, but not enough. Henry felt the floor tilt under him. Next week. He thought they had more time, weeks, maybe months to scrape it together. His hands, still raw from the shop, clenched uselessly. All that work, all those hours, and he'd fallen short. The boys saw it slump in his shoulders, the way his eyes went distant and stepped closer. We're not stopping, Tom said, fierce. We'll figure it out. The darkest moment hit him later, alone in the living room while the house slept. He pulled the wooden box from under the bed, his secret stash. Every dollar earned in pain in, counted it slow. 10,000, give or take. Tom's car would add 20. Ryan's overtime, maybe 5 more. 35,000. 15 short. He sat there, the numbers spinning, the clock ticking louder than ever. Lisa's face flashed in his mind, her smile, her laugh. The way she'd held his hand at their wedding, and a cold fear gripped him. What if they couldn't make it? What if he'd failed her? But then he heard footsteps, Tom and Ryan, creeping downstairs, their voices hushed but determined. I'll sell my gear too, Ryan was saying. Laptop, monitors another $1,000, easy. Tom nodded. I've got some stocks I can cash out. We're close, Ree. We can do this. They didn't see Henry in the shadows, didn't know he heard, but it lit something in Hima's spark, faint but real. They weren't giving up. Neither would he. He slid the box back under the bed, his mind turning. He couldn't work the shop. Not now. But there were other waste-old favors he could call in, tools he could sell. The boys were stepping up, and he'd meet them halfway. They had a week. They'd make it work somehow. Henry Lawson didn't sleep much that week, the last week before Lisa's surgery, the clock ticking louder with every sunrise. His knees still ached, his back a stubborn knot, but he wasn't sitting still anymore. The boys had taken the reins, Tom selling his Mustang, Ryan pulling double shifts, and Henry found a new kind of strength watching them. 65 years old, beaten down but not out, he dug into his own corners, calling in favors and scraping what he could. He wasn't alone anymore, and that changed everything. By Monday, the plan was in motion. Henry sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, his voice steady as he worked through his list. First was Pete, an old buddy from the shop days who'd owed him since '98. Got that lathe you lent me, Pete said, gruff but willing. Sell it 500 easy. Next was a neighbor, Mrs. Carter, who'd always admired the oak dresser he'd built for Ella. I'll take it, she said, 200 cash. Bit by bit, he added to the pot tools, odd jobs, anything he could move. It wasn't much, but it was his. Tom and Ryan matched him, step for step. The Mustang sold fast, 20,000 wired to their account by Tuesday. Ryan's gear went next, laptop, monitors, even a fancy headset, another 1,500. Tom cashed out some stocks, a risky move that netted $4,000. They pooled it all, counting late into the night. The wooden box Henry had stashed under the bed, now sitting open on the table. His 10,000, their 35, the extra 1,000 he'd scraped, 46,000. For 1,000 short. Close, but not there. Wednesday morning, they faced it together. Tom paced the living room, his usual swagger gone. We're cutting it thin, he said, voice tight. Ryan nodded, hunched over a calculator. $4,000 in 2 days. We can't borrow that fast. Henry sat quiet, the box in front of him, his hands resting on the worn edges. He'd poured everything into this sweat, pain, years of quiet sacrifice, and it still wasn't enough. The fear crept back, cold and sharp, but then Ryan looked up, eyes bright. Wait, Carl. He's got that fund. Carl, the shop owner. Henry'd forgotten the old man kept a small emergency pot for his crew, built from decades of side hustles. They drove over that afternoon, Henry limping but determined, and laid it out. Carl listened, leaning on his cane, his face unreadable. 4,000, huh, he said finally, rubbing his chin. For Lisa? Henry nodded, throat tight. Carl didn't hesitate. Done. I'll cover it. You've earned that and more, Lawson. The relief hit like a wave, knocking the breath out of them. Tom clapped Carl on the back. Ryan grinned wide, and Henry just sat there, head bowed, a weight lifting he hadn't known he could shed. By Friday, the money was in $50,000, wired to the hospital, the surgery locked in for Saturday morning. They'd done it. Together. That night, Henry sat by Lisa's bed, her hand frail in his. She didn't know the half of it, just that the bills were covered, that she'd be okay. "You're a stubborn old fool," she murmured, smiling weak. "But I love you for it." He squeezed her hand, his voice rough. "Promised I'd stick around, didn't I?" She nodded, drifting off, and he stayed there, watching her breathe, the fear of finally giving way to hope. The surgery went smooth 8 hours, a tense wait in a sterile lounge, but the doctor came out smiling. "She's stable," he said. "Should pull through fine." Lisa woke up Sunday, groggy but alive, her eyes finding Henry first. He took her hand again, softer this time. "Told you I'd always be here," he said, and she squeezed back, a tear slipping down her cheek. Tom and Ryan were there too, standing by the bed, their faces raw. "We didn't know, Mom," Tom said, voice breaking. "We should have." Lisa cut him off, her smile faint but real. "You're here now. That's enough." Ryan wiped his eyes, nodding, and Henry looked at them as boys, grown men who'd laughed at him, now crying for their mother. He felt it then, a lump in his throat he couldn't swallow. They'd come through not just for her, but for him. A month later, they were back home, Lisa on the mend, the house warm with spring light. They sat down to dinner, simple stuff, soup and bread, and Henry set an old photo on the table. Him and Lisa, young and broke, with baby Tom in her arms. "Family's not a duty," he said, voice low. "It's love." "Took me too long to see that." Tom and Ryan nodded, quiet, the lesson sinking deep. "Here's the thing. Henry's not the only one out there, working quiet, carrying loads no one sees. Maybe your folks did the same sacrifice, something you never knew till later. What's your story? Drop it in the comments side. Love to hear it. Let's keep this close. And hey, thanks for sticking with me through this. It's been real, and I'm grateful you're here. If this hit you somewhere soft, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and tell me what you think below. More stories. Come and check out the next one when you can. See you soon.